Hey, welcome back to the Max Revenue Show. This is our special series that we are calling Diary of a New Producer. We're giving you a behind the scenes look into the life of a new producer who we're calling Incognito and showing you what he's going through, the good, the bad, the ugly, as he's working his way to build $1 million book from scratch. And also give you a little perspective from his mentor, that's myself, Micah, and I will be your host as well. So let's get into this, folks. This is week 11. If you missed the past 10 weeks, go check them out. Every week we're talking about different things, right? Not just numbers and all that boring stuff, but we're getting into just different topics that I think you'll find really, really helpful, especially if you're a mentor or a new producer. So this week we're going to talk about 5 different things. Real briefly, we're going to touch on Ian's numbers. We're going to talk about motivation. Going to talk about when the interview process starts, when you're trying to get new business. Talk about curveballs, and last but not least, BORs or bust. All right, so let's talk about Ian and his numbers. As I mentioned before, we're in week 11. He's written one account. It's about $10,000 in revenue, and so that's kind of where he's at. Now, some people might be thinking, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I say in your first year, you don't want to get so caught up in revenue, but you want to get more focused on how many at-bats are you getting, right? How many conversations are you having? Are you having enough meetings? Are you getting to some final presentations? Those are the numbers that you want to be focused on, because ultimately that's really all you can control. You can't control if you get, rolled or something on a $100,000 revenue account. That will just happen, right? There's things you can do to prevent that, but you get the point. So last week he set 2 meetings. He made 200 calls to set those 2 meetings, guys. Put that in perspective. I know it seems like a grueling number of calls to make just to set 2 meetings, but in this industry, if you set 1 meeting a week with a qualified prospect, you're going to have success. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your numbers, right? Typically the numbers, again, for me have always been about one meeting set for roughly every 6-7 conversations, right? And it takes about 10-11 calls to have a conversation. That's what the data has shown me over the last 12 years or so. It's changed a little bit here and there, but not much, okay? So enough about numbers for now. Next, I'm going to talk about motivation, right? What I hadn't done and what I just started doing last week, more so because we were having some crossover of prospects, is I said, Ian, hey man, I'm going to start sharing the meetings I set with you and some prospects I'm working on, so you don't call them as well, right? And the reason for that is that we both use Insurance X-State, but we don't have like the company paid for version. So we're all using our own siloed versions, which can create these issues. So side note, if you are running an agency, I would probably just buy Insurance X-State, use it as your CRM instead of Salesforce. Maybe use Salesforce for deal tracking, but you don't even have to do that. That would help alleviate this issue, right? So anyways, back to the motivation deal. And this was a total byproduct. I can't take credit for it. But as I was talking with Ian today, he was saying, it's funny. Keep sending me those meetings, Micah, because what it did is it just lit a fire in me. I was like, man, he set this meeting, that meeting, he's working on these deals. And it just lit a fire in him, right? He has that competitive spirit. I know we talk a lot about the comparison trap and comparison being like such a bad thing. I think, yeah, we can overdo it, of course, right? However, if you compare yourself to the right people and you don't get so consumed with it, it can also work as a huge motivator. It's just like benchmarking, right? Like if you're in your own silo, you might think that, hey, I'm doing awesome. But then you see the guy down the block is just crushing it, or the agent, in another city is just 10x your numbers. And you're like, holy cow, what is he doing? How can I learn to get better, right? So use comparison wisely, but let it motivate you. So that's what I want to say on motivation. All right, the third thing we're talking about is the interview process. When does it really start if you're working on a new account? We talked about this because he set a meeting, Ian did, and he's like, man, I had 4 people come to the meeting. Was that normal? We talked a little bit about that. I said, yeah, that's awesome. As long as the decision maker's there at that first meeting, that's perfect. And then I asked if he had ever provided an agenda. And he said, no, I really hadn't. I said, it's not going to make or break you, but what it starts to do is it sets the tone for your sales process. right? So especially if you're doing online meetings, in person still can be beneficial, but I think especially when you're doing online, having an agenda is really, really helpful. Now, if you have your first meeting outline that we talk about in the producer's playbook, you know what the outline is you want to talk about. That's what your agenda is, but you're not going to send them that. You send them just 4 bullet points. The 4 bullet points I told Ian that I would send is bullet point 1 would say, your company, where you're at today, what have you done in the past around insurance? That's bullet point 1. Bullet point 2 might be insurance distribution process or insurance game. Understand how it works, question mark. That's bullet point 2. Bullet point 3, the insurance distribution process, how it works. And then bullet point 4 is due diligence process, what it looks like. And then the last one is, I guess you could say, next steps, bullet point 5, right? So something like that, make it your own, but you get the point. And what I told him is I said, it really sets the tone. And this is one of my weaknesses personally, is I'm a laid back person, pretty nonchalant about things. Doesn't mean I'm not motivated. I'm just, a lot of things don't bug me, right? If something's done a little sloppily or it's not, I'm not, my dad was a Marine, but so I think, there's some people that like, hey, make your bed every day, do this, do this, do this. If someone doesn't do that, it's not going to like rub me the wrong way. However, again, one of my weaknesses is assuming every buyer is like me. That's not the case, right? Some people, when you're in the interview process or you're setting a first meeting, that's when the interview process starts. So having an agenda, right? Following up in a timely fashion, being on time, those things are so basic, but all those little things can start to really paint a picture for your prospect of what kind of agent you are. How professional are you? How do you run the ship, right? Because all that matters when they're spending a lot of money on their insurance and they're making a major decision to potentially fire a broker, hire you to represent them for their insurance needs. So it doesn't mean you need to wear a 3-piece suit and all that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, make sure you follow through on your actions. You're consistent, you're professional, right? And that's a message for myself too. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is curveballs. And no, not because we're in October here and it's, the playoffs have started for the MLB. My Brewers lost in the first series, so anyways, I'm not really too in tune with what's going on. But this came up last week. Ian and I were talking middle of the week. He had a great first meeting. At the end of the meeting, he's like, yeah, all of a sudden the guy's like, okay, so what do you need to quote? Should I send you over, whatever? And Ian was like, man, I was totally thrown off guard because I thought, I went through my first meeting script. I was very clear how the insurance game works, very clear. I wasn't going to quote, very clear. I have a different way of doing things, which is due diligence, yet the prospect wasn't listening, essentially. And I said, man, this happens a lot. This is the reason you got to remind your prospects constantly, hey, I'm not quoting, all right? I'm trying to do due diligence, that's it. You're gonna have to tell them that more than once. A lot of times people just won't get it because they've been so trained to quote. So many agents out there that's all they've known, that's how they buy insurance. So it's a total paradigm shift for some of these folks. So understand that, right? And but this was a total curveball. Came up, he's like, and he kind of fumbled over his words. They talked through things, and what he said, I don't think was bad. He told me what he had told him, but they ended it. Ultimately, it was like, yeah, maybe we're not a good fit. If that's how you guys do things. Essentially, the buyer said, hey, I shop every year with 3 agents. What do you need? Tell me what markets you need, and we'll send you the stuff. Now, it could be our natural inclination to be like, dude, why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. Remember, these buyers are going through a total paradigm shift. In a 15-minute conversation, you just took that guy from thinking insurance works this way to spinning them on their head and saying, no, it works this way, actually. And you can't expect every single buyer or controller, CFO to really grasp that or buy in 100% all the time, right? So when you get these curveballs, someone all of a sudden right hooks you with something that you didn't expect, take a second and extend the conversation. Instead of thinking how to respond with a question. So in this case, Ian was told from the guy, yeah, we shop with 3 agents every year, so what do you need? Hey, Pete, can I just ask you a quick question? How's that worked out for you in the past? Can you just share that with me? I'd be happy to do that, Pete, but yeah, can you first just share me how that's worked out for you in the past? Or what's that process gone like for you? Has it yielded some good results? Again, all you're doing is extending the conversation and having them clarify what they mean a little bit. And it could be a million different questions, but that's just an example. And then it gives you time to kind of gather your thoughts and then respond, right? Doesn't mean you don't need to prepare for these responses and stuff like that, but yeah, it just buys you a little time. So extend that conversation. I had one time where I showed up at a first meeting and the guy's like, plops his policy binder on the desk. This is literally walk in his office, plops it. What else do you need to quote? This should be everything you need, right? Man, talk about a curveball kind of, right? Because you get to that first meeting, you're expecting to have a conversation. Now, how I handled that curveball is I said, hey, Art, man, I'd be happy to do that, but can we just take a step back quick? I don't even know if it makes sense to quote. Can we just have like a 10, 15 minute conversation? Anyways, ended up talking, had a great conversation. He bought into my way of doing things. We broke up a 30-year relationship, won the business, right? So you got to be just ready to handle some of these curveballs. And some of it comes with just experiencing reps. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about, let you run BOR or bust, which is kind of tied into this curveball, right? So us in the BOR camp who say, hey, BOR is the best way to buy insurance. Broker of record letters, hire one agent exclusively, let them do their work. I'm such a believer in it personally because I have seen the results it yields for the clients that hire me, right? So I'm a huge believer in it. However, again, guys, understand buyers are in a different place mentally than you are, okay? You can't expect them just to come where you are day one, okay? Some do though, a lot do, but there's a lot that don't. And so the whole BOR or bust, and some people say BOR exclusively, that's it. Now, when I started in the insurance, that was all I was told. I could only BOR it, and I think there's some positives to that, right? It forces you to keep your blinders on, to not kind of get crazy ideas, go after things you shouldn't. However, there's some really good opportunities out there with really good buyers who just can't come around to maybe your way of doing things that you could probably still win, but they're so attached to the idea of I need to see something from you tangibly first before I hire you. And all I would say is don't dismiss these buyers 100% because I know, because I'm building my book back and I have won some of these accounts in my first 2 years, $20,000, $30,000 revenue accounts, right? Now, not most of them. There's been a couple of these that most of my accounts are BOR, but a couple of these, again, that I've taken my calculated chances on. So all I will say about BOR or bust is you can leave the conversation open when you're talking due diligence even and say, hey, I want to just do this due diligence. At the end of the due diligence process, one of three things is really going to happen. A, I'm going to tell you you're in a great spot. B, I'm going to ask you to hire me because I've found some serious issues and I think it makes sense to change agents. Or third thing is maybe it makes sense to market to a very specific market, right? Maybe you're in a good spot, but there's a market that's being missed or something like that, right? So that's how you can kind of set it up in the beginning. But let's say you go and do the due diligence, present, and they're just not willing to hire. They're not able to cross that bridge. That's where you can say, okay, hey, here's the deal, Steve. I don't normally do this, but I really like you. I think you'd be good to partner with. I think we can help you. But it sounds to me like you just need something tangible before you can make that decision to fire a person. Is that right? Yeah, that's it. I just need to, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll make an exception, but here's what has to be met. I've already reviewed your policies. I got your expiring premiums. What I need, though, in addition to that is here's the top 3 markets that I really, really want or need. If I get these, I'll come back this date and, you'll be able to fire your guy, right? And you can set those terms up, like, hey, what is it going to take to even leave? Because it might not take much. They just need to see something, right? So I'm not going to get into that on this call, but you can work through those setting the ground rules with your buyer as well. So I just want to talk through that a little bit with you because I think sometimes we talk BOR, and you get so caught up in that you maybe pass up some really good prospects. You just can't come around to that way of thinking. And I personally wouldn't dismiss that, especially when you're building your book back. Now, if you've got $1 million, $2 million book, fine, tell them to go pound sand or whatever. That's on you, right? And revenue size matters too. You don't want to make exceptions for a $3,000 account, 4 or 5. I'm talking 20, 30, 40, 50 plus, right? That's where maybe there's some nuance to this conversation. Hey, I've talked long enough. That's week 11, folks. I appreciate you chiming in, listening along, following along on this series. I hope you're getting a ton of value out of it. If you are, follow us on YouTube, click the bell so you don't miss future videos. Check us out on LinkedIn. Check out the Producer Playbook. Check out our whatever else we have. Have a good day.